Hey everyone, how's it going? We've featured my Rush Plana deck in the Viral Weaponization successful demo episode, and I had quite a bit of fun with it. I mean, come on, net damage decks that try to rush our agendas are always fun, so we'll be playing the deck once again. Today, our opponent will be none other than one of UK's finest players in Echo, who will be showcasing their very own brew of Kumalo. Trust me, this is gonna be a really fun game. I can't wait to dive into it, so without further ado. Now, if you remember the successful demo episode we did, I mentioned that what we want to see in our opening hand are some power cards in Rashida Jahim or Ginger City Grid, which can help accelerate our game, and a piece of ice to protect it. We have both of those, so we are really good to go here. Cortex Lock into Rashida is the perfect play, and then I just spend my last click to draw and pass over the turn. Pretty confident about the play that I made until I started my next turn. Then I realized that I made a pretty big mistake as I fired a Rashida, drawing 3 cards plus a mandatory draw. Look at that! 9 cards in my hand and I'm not cerebral imaging. This is a problem. So the mistake I made here was, obviously I'm not familiar enough with Rashida. I shouldn't have drawn on my last turn. What I should have done was to play another card or even just click for a credit, because right now I have to shake too many cards from my hand. I would be forced to discard at the end of the turn one way or another. So typically Rashida works very well in Jinteki for a very good reason. The celebrity gift that I'm hovering over right now becomes very good with Rashida because you can show any 5 cards in your big hand and the runner won't exactly know how many agendas are in your hand. Typically, in most other cases when you play celebrity gift, it's after you start your turn with 5 cards, you mandatory draw into your 6th card. So playing a celebrity gift would mean that you're showing all 5 of the remaining 5 cards in your hand. The runner has a very good idea of the exact number of agendas in your hand. You can't be so sure if you have so many cards in your hand and are just showing any 5 of them. So this would have been a perfect juncture to play Celeb Gift, and I was pondering over it. The biggest problem in this situation was that it's a double. As I mentioned before, my priority here is getting rid of cards before the discard phase, so I'm gonna play 2 pieces of ice and an IPO, discarding a Marcus Betty. You never want to be discarding extra cards, so that was suboptimal, but hey, at least I get to play the gift now. The problem with playing the gift now is obviously my opponent knows that I have a 1 in 4 Nisei Mark II in my hand. This would have been avoided if I could play Celebrity Gift on the Rashida turn, so downsides there. Now my opponent will definitely be looking to siege my HQ. Thankfully, I feel very secure on HQ because I put a Chiyashi on it. So now my opponent's going to attempt to run it. They won't take the face check punishment because they pre-installed David. But that's fine. It expends the David and they miss on the Nisei. They do get my second Batty though, which is a pain. And the bigger pain is I have another Chiyashi. It's on the remote and I don't quite have the money to pay for it. So I'm going to install Advanced Nisei, but I'm really hoping that Kumalo doesn't run my remote here. Otherwise, I'll be forced to rest the Chiyashi to protect the Nisei, going down to 0 credits. And that's exactly what my opponent does. Very smart. So I'm going to end the run here. Thankfully, they're on Yusuf. And not enough virus counters to deal with Chiyashi, so they're taking 4 net damage. They're ending the run, but they can now plow through R&D. Using Kumalo's ability, trashing G's Motor Bioroids, going in again for a double dip. So they got 2 accesses of R&D while I protected my Nisei. Who's winning here? I'm not sure. What I do know is that I mandatory drew into an Oboe Carter. They saw it off the stack last turn, but because they hit my Chiyashi before, they went down to 2 cards, they couldn't steal the Oboe Carter. But they do know that I have an Oboe Carter in hand, and they steal a Viral Weaponization next turn. So I do get this Nisei scored. Hooray! Really? I mean, at what cost, right? My opponent is getting turn after turn of free R&D runs with turning wheel counters, with Yusuf virus counter gains. A lot of value out of this. Meanwhile, my opponent smashing a lot of cards into the bin. The Celebrity Gift is now in the bin, gone already as they destroyed it, I think, the turn before. And now I'm stuck on 2 credits, very awkwardly with a Cortex Law on R&D. This is not the ice you want to defend your R&D when your opponent only has 1 free memory. That's one upside of Yusuf. It's pretty good against Cortex Lock because it consumes 2 memory. So here I replace the Cortex Lock with Fairchild 2, but I'm not rezzing the R&D ice here as my opponent proceeds to chew through my R&D by trashing Ginger Grid. The reason is I wanted to play Hedge Fund this turn. Rezzing the Fairchild would leave me on 0 credits, very poor. I can't play Hedge Fund. So I had to wait a turn, play the Hedge Fund. Now I can start rezzing the Fairchild 2 to defend my R&D. But by now the damage had been done. That Ginger Grid would have been absolutely sweet on my remote, as would have been a celebrity gift right about now. But they're all in the bin. So now I'm just forced to draw through, hoping to find a 4-2 agenda that I can jam into the remote. At this point, with a Nisei counter, I can easily score a second agenda behind the Chiyashi, which is fortifying my remote very well. Another thing I would have liked to do is to get G's Model Baroids out. Typically with this deck, you would just play the G's Model Baroids naked, and you know, if the runner trashes it, you're winning because they paid 5 credits and are now economically behind. But against Kumalo, Jeeves is basically a free trash. They gain 1 virus counter from a successful run with Yusuf. So only paying 2 virus counters for Jeeves, that's not worth my time, you know, spending a click to get the Jeeves out. So if I want Jeeves to be out, I need to protect it. And I do have a Jewel here, so this looks pretty tempting. Jewel into Jeeves seems like a good way to tax my opponent. And so that's exactly what I do here. If you remember from the successful demo episode, I did a similar play. After my opponent knew that I was on G's Model Baroids, my Echo here knows that I'm on it because they trashed it off R&D earlier. I now make this play and attempt to induce them into thinking that server 1 might be a 4-2 agenda. When Jeeves is out on the board, you cannot discount that fact. The ability for the Corp to quadruple advance and score a 4-2 from a never advanced state. So this should hopefully induce some runs, be it on server 1 or server 2, I'm winning either way, forcing them to get a breakers out one way or another. They drop a data sucker, go for archives, get a lot of virus counters, 2 virus counters with Yusuf and Sucker, and then ooh, I didn't see that one coming. That was very good play from Echo. He didn't bite on the bluff, instead he played Hacktivist, which makes it even harder for me to get any work done. The NGO in the remote is basically blank. I can't afford to res an NGO here if it means that I have a chance of getting my Obo Carter in the bin thanks to Hacktivist. Same thing with the G's Model Baroids in the remote. This is really bad for me. So after careful consideration, I realized I needed to get rid of the Hacktivist ASAP. It is hindering my game plan by a lot, and preventing me from playing cards like Rashida or G's without worrying about the Obo Carter safety. So the best way to save over Obo Carter is to put in the remote and advance it. Now my opponent has to contest it, but they don't have enough resources for it. They're gonna get enough virus counters to get past my Chiyashi, so I'm gonna have to be mentally prepared to spend the Nisei token here defending an Obo Carter. Not ideal, I would rather defend a Nisei or a viral weaponization, but it's a pretty desperate situation. I need to get rid of the Hacktivist. You gotta do what you gotta do. Instead, my opponent goes for R&D instead, and I'm more than happy to see that because I can rest my Fairchild 2 here. That's an ice they can't afford to break because as they tried to get a Black Orchestra out, they realized they were short on memory. That's what happens when you play with Yusuf without your console out. My opponent, realizing that, chose not to install the Black Orchestra, taking that back, instead eating the full force of Fairchild 2 without clicks. They're gonna lose 4 credits, they're gonna take a brain damage, and I'm more than happy to deal brain damage when I'm playing Obo Carter Protocol. Alright, so very interesting turn of events here. I was so sure they were gonna challenge my remote as always, but instead, they went for R&D for single access. Maybe double access with the turning wheel. Let's see what they do here. They steal and they say, ugh, okay, that's pretty bad. I really needed that agenda to close out the game. And they run HQ last turn, thinking that there's an Obo Carter in my hand, which they're not wrong. There would be, except that I've jammed it in the remote here. So they're not gonna see. Yep, they tried to sweep my entire hand to find the Obo Carter, but it's in the one place they can't access. I pre-res Jeeves here because I realized that if they trash one of my cards, I won't. Actually, if they trash both my cards, you know, if they trash DNA Tracker with Well, they can't trash any tracker. Alright, so I guess that wasn't a worry, but I just wanted to get the Hacktivist trigger out of the way before mandatorily drawing. So I mandatorily draw a Kakugo here, and with Jeeves out, my opponent did not contest the Jeeves, which is arguably a mistake. I get to score the Obo Kata from a single advanced state. 4 advancement tokens later, we are now at match point. Both of us. They need an Obo Kata to win, but they have turntable installed. So now any agenda from R&D wins them the game, as they can swap it for the Obo Kata in my score area. Thankfully, I'm also on the match point. Any agenda wins me here. I'm only running 2 pointers and 3 pointers here. And speaking of two pointers, there it is, right off the top of my deck. I immediately go for the install, and even though I can score it with the help of Jeeves, there is the possibility that my opponent, rich as they are and with Mimic installed, will run my Jeeves to trash it, delaying my win by 1 turn. So I had to advance it here, just in case my opponent decides to trash Jeeves. I want to win next turn unconditionally. So this puts them in a tough spot. With my Nisei's token still intact and them not running Paperclip, they have no way to run through my remote Chiyashi twice. This Chiyashi is doing a lot of work, especially against a runner not prepared for the likes of Chiyashi. Yusuf is just not that good at breaking through Chiyashi, not twice. So my opponent has to go for R&D as their most probable server to win on. We do the maths. I have 9 agendas in this deck. 4 of them are in the score areas, 1 is installed, ready to be scored. That leaves 4 agendas in a deck of 20. But my opponent's not getting just that 4 and 20 access. They're gonna get a lot of accesses. They first run R&D and Kumalo the Excalibur, giving them a turning wheel counter, which allows them to access yet another 2 fresh cards from R&D, making this essentially a Maker's Eye, a 3-card access. In a relatively dense R&D, yeah, they were bound to find the winning agenda. Some of you might have noticed that I could have prevented my opponent from winning. I did have the paid ability window to fire the Nisei Mark II token after my opponent committed to the turning wheel access. And because Obo Kata was the second card down in R&D, they couldn't rerun to steal it because they lost their turning wheel counters. The problem with that play was, had I done that, they would then have enough virus counters to siege my server 1. I couldn't defend server 1 if my opponent decided to run their last click, because I no longer had the Nisei token and they now do have enough virus counters to break the Chiyashi. So unfortunately, I was doomed either way. Other than that, I don't think I have much to talk about in terms of my gameplay or my deck. If you have any comments or suggestions or lines of play you think I should have made, feel free to leave it in the comment section, because for now I'll be focusing on my opponent Echo, who brought to the table a very interesting Kumalo build in my opinion. Coming from someone who has done a lot of Kumalo episodes, this is a refreshing breath of air, as I see him use Clone Chip as his restricted card to great effect. There are lots of reasons why Clone Chip is so powerful that it's deserving of his space on the MWL, and I think Echo made some very good calls in his deck that allowed that to happen. Of course, we didn't get to see that during this game at all. Clone Chip wasn't quite relevant, but off the top of my head, here are some theory crafted reasons why Echo chose Clone Chip and how it fits in his deck. He's able to play 3 copies of Inject, which becomes a powerful yet low risk draw card, because any trash programs like Yusuf or Mimic can easily be recurred with Clone Chip. Speaking of recursion, David can also be recurred with Clone Chip as a finite use breaker. Being able to recur it again and again can save you a lot of money breaking big eyes otherwise. And of course, the instant speed Clot threat. You may have noticed that Echo was running Clot in his deck. That's because he's using Clone Chip to threaten anyone who plays fast advance cards, the ability to stop their fast advance completely. So that's great and all, but the best thing about his build is that I think he came to a pretty similar conclusion after all my Kumalo testing games as well. That is that the best Kumalo builds don't necessarily pack all those crappy virus cards. A deck, I mean, even though Kumalo synergizes with viruses, at the end of the day, if you're stuffing in crappy virus cards in your deck, all you're still gonna get is a crappy deck. Judging by what Echo is playing, apparently Yusuf is Kumalo's most powerful virus program. And to break that down, here's why. let's consider the baseline virus. Those are viruses that generate virus tokens once per turn, which help fuel Kumalo's ability. Cards like Virus Breeding Ground, Tripano, and Knob Carry. All of them have the potential to gain 1 virus token a turn. So that's the baseline standard. You want to be gaining virus tokens at least at this rate. And even then, it's okay. It's not amazing. It's not something to write home about, but it is an acceptable virus gaining rate. If we want to make a really good Kumalo deck, we want to try to generate virus tokens faster than this. One way to do this is to use programs that gain virus counters every time you trash a card. These are not limited by once per turn, so potentially if you trash a lot of cards in a turn, you can get a lot of virus counters quickly. Cards like Friday Chip, Consume, and Gravedigger fulfill that condition. Trouble is, you're gonna find it pretty hard to reliably trash more than 1 card per turn. So, trying to get these cards to rival Virus Breeding Grounds efficiency is already quite an uphill battle. A far easier way to do this, I would argue, would be to go for the cards that allow you to gain virus tokens once per successful run. Again, without the turn restriction, you are going to be running if you want to win, and this, helps you snowball further. Cards like Yusuf as mentioned, as well as Hemorrhage and Plague. Now, Plague has by far the best virus token gaining rate of any card in the game. If you think of a single turn where click 1 you install Plague, clicks 2 to 4 you run the server that you directed Plague at, typically Archives, that's 6 virus counters you have on Plague. That lends very well to, something like an Acacia if the corp is purging, or, the ability to trash big cards with Kumalo's ability. Plague is very powerful. Unfortunately, just like Hemorrhage, it suffers from the big problem that it's not one of the core cards that most runners need. An economy card, a draw card, or an icebreaker. These are not it, and as such, it's very difficult to justify playing Hemorrhage and Plague, whereas Yusuf helps you shore up the need to have a Fractor while gaining virus counters passively as you make runs. So this is why Yusuf is a lot more powerful, and presumably why Echo went for it. Again, some very inspiring lessons we can take away from watching other people build and run their Kumalo decks. Echo sure got me good this game, even though it ended up being a nail biter in that if he whiffed on R&D I would have won. But yeah, it's a very good Kumalo deck that can stand on its own 2 feet. And hopefully you enjoyed that showcase as much as I did. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and happy net running. I'll see you next time, hopefully with a fresh new deck.